Happy Friday. Today we're going to be talking about the fundamentals for illustrating and what you as a writer need to know in approaching an illustrator to get your children's book ready for publishing. So the first thing I have to say with new writers is that they approach illustrators and want to discuss, the whole process. A lot of people don't have time for that. So you're better off to do your research if you can online, because it can be very frustrating for an illustrator to be spending multiple hours on explaining things to you. So this is why I create these podcasts, because I want to inform you so that you know what to do going forward. So number one thing, illustrations are usually broken down per page. So if you're looking to have a book that has spreads in it, and what I mean by a spread, it means is 2 pages in one. So it's going to cover across the whole, both sides of the page. Illustrators charge a different price for this. So single page is one price, spreads is another price. The reason why this is because spreads are double the work. So they're having to do it straight across a wider area, and it takes a lot longer to color, to draw everything. So it's usually a spread is going to cost you more than a single page would be. Okay, so there are different types of illustrations, and you have to specify to the illustrator, and you will see when you look at their work, their portfolio, what kinds of things that they are good at. So there's digital, which is I noticed lately people are starting to shy away from that because there's too much of it out there. So they're going back to traditional, and what traditional means, they are done by hand, watercolors, pencil work, or a combination of any of those by hand. So usually traditional is much more costly than digital, because digital you can just, if you know, and are a graphic artist, if you know anything about it, you can take an object, shift it over, and everything's in layers, and nothing really will be affected if you do it properly. So digital is a much easier medium. However, it still is pricey, because the more details a digital image is, obviously the longer it's going to take, no matter if it's digital or if it's traditional. It's still going to take some time. So that's, again, something to bear in mind. So the more details you put into something, or the more you ask for the illustrator, the higher the price is going to be. So traditional, the reason why traditional is so expensive is because it's, number one, you're doing it on a piece of paper. It's not very forgiving when it's coming to, let's say, watercolors or painting. You make a mistake and it's difficult to take off. So you may have to have the artist start all over again. They'll have to do it all over again from scratch on another piece of paper. So it's not the same as digital. So therefore, traditional is a lot more expensive because of that. The effect for traditional is always going to be a lot better than digital. I find that digital, no matter how good the artist is, still lacks some warmth. I don't know if anybody's ever come across that or felt that way. But I find that traditional artwork is much more, it just has a special quality to it. I find, and that's what you're paying for, right? So you're paying for very special illustrations you're taking a piece of the artist there. Whereas much as the artist has their own style on digital, there's something missing there. It doesn't have that touch. So yeah. So anyway, so when you're approaching an illustrator, you need to know these different types of illustrations going forward. And it's nice for the illustrator to see is that you've looked at their portfolio and you pinpoint things that they've already done and say, I like this drawing that you did or whatever, so that they can kind of say, okay, so that's the kind of style you're going for. That way the illustrator is already informed, already knows what you want. As far as layout, you need to know what your layout is too. So if you want to have spaces incorporated within the illustrations, you need to specify that to the illustrator. Otherwise, the illustrator is just going to draw, right? They're just going to draw whatever you said, and you're going to have to figure out how to make space, within those illustrations. So having a clear instruction set for an illustrator is very, very important. It makes communication that much easier between the two of you, and your overall project will go that much faster. So if you can do a breakdown of, okay, so I want this kind of illustration, I want such and such a, amount of spreads within that book. And, and number one thing too is per page, if you can put a point reference for each page. We don't really care to see the story. We can use it as a reference, but if you've already given us instruction like, okay, so character A is doing this, and the setting is they're outside or they're with X amount of characters, they're, and their feeling is this, and the sky is this way, so if you already give them proper instructions per illustration, there's no need to actually give them the whole story. Like, you can, but you don't have to. So that's another thing. The very experienced illustrator doesn't really necessarily need to have the whole story in front of them. As long as they get the idea of what's happening in the story and how you want the emotions to be portrayed for the characters, that's the most important thing. Another thing, when you're looking at getting illustrations for a children's book, very important that you know how many pages is required as well, that can be put into print. Because if you do less than 24 on Amazon, they will not accept it for print. If you do less than, I think it's 22, but I'm not 100%. I think it's 21 possibly. If you do less than that on Ingram, they won't accept it either. They have to have a certain amount of pages in order to print. So you need to know that information moving forward, so that when you're putting your book together, you're not going to run into problems in the future, not having enough illustrations to be okay to have your book in print. If you're not interested to have your book in print, then it doesn't matter. You want your book to be an ebook, so then you can go whatever amount of pages you want. So that doesn't matter. If it's going to stay strictly as a digital component, then you would just tell the illustrator, I'm only doing an ebook, so I don't need X amount of illustrations. So that way that the illustrator's not going to start, oh, you need more, so they know exactly what's going on, right? For illustrators, the average prices for illustrations, and I'm going super low here, $30 is base for your illustrations. You can get it cheaper, but then you run into the problem of it being clip art and not necessarily an original illustration. Now, what happens with that is you don't know if that has been copyrighted. So you could be running into problems in the future for these clip art images. Let's say, for an example, Canva. You need to make sure that you're cleared to be able to reproduce the images on Canva. Now, Canva's regulations are, if you take a base image, you have to be able to manipulate it with other images to be able to sell it. So if you're just doing a base illustration, like one character that you saw, and you're not doing anything else to kind of make it your own, then you're going to run into copyright issues with Canva. So you have to understand that there's all these different little legalities too that you need to know about illustrations. And one thing I'm going to say, as an illustrator who's worked with several different people over the years, please, please, please don't send us an image and expect us to duplicate it exactly how it is, because that is illegal. It's a copyright issue. We can do something in the ballpark of that image, but we cannot do the exact same image. You would be better off to go and talk to the actual artist and ask if you can get permission for them to use that. Otherwise, no, the illustrator is definitely not going to be duplicating that for you. And if they do, they're not doing the right thing. So be careful. All my illustrators and freelance illustrators that I have, who I work with, who I've known for quite a while now, they always do original images. They hand draw them digitally on their stuff. So you don't need to worry about, if you come and get illustrations from me, you're going to know they're definitely original. Another thing to bear in mind is this is an investment. So if you're looking at, let's say, 15, 20 pages, you got to add that up. Like, what's that going to cost you? How much marketing are you going to put into it? Do you have the time to invest all of this stuff, right? So if you don't have the time or money to invest in that, I would look into a traditional publisher like me, who does do traditional publishing for children's books as well. So I do offer self-publishing services for those who want to do it on their own, and they just want illustrations, or they just want editing. Or I have packages that'll do all of that, and all they have to do is upload it. So there's that avenue, and then there's the avenue of going with traditional publishing. So look at your options, look at what's best suited for you. There's always a way around things in order for you to make your dream a reality. So just do your research and make sure everything is, you know what you're getting into going into it. Because there are illustrators out there on Fiverr and other places where sitting there saying, well, I'll do an illustration for you for like $5, and they're using clip art. They're not using original art. So you really, really have to be careful. You want to go cheap, it's not going to be worth your while, because if you do get some problems going down the road, it's going to cost you in, legal bills later on. So always make sure that you're, being educated before you move forward. So I hope that helps in the whole process of, what it involves to work with an illustrator and know the sort of the terminology moving forward. So I hope you enjoy this podcast. Please follow me if you like it, and subscribe. And I look forward to speaking to you again with another podcast that I'll be doing about writing. All right. See ya.